Sometimes at the end of the day, it's just about getting the win, and that's exactly what Ole Miss did, securing a 26-14 victory at home, fresh off a bye against the Oklahoma Sooners. And now, the best still could be ahead for the Rebels moving into the month of November. Welcome on into the SEC Unfiltered postgame show. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson, breaking down everything that we saw at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium as the Rebels advanced to 6-2 on the year, securing a double-digit victory. Real quickly, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below because this is your number one source for all things SEC moving forward. And of course, hit that ring notification for live instances, reaction shows, Sunday Fun Day, Dave Talk Ball, Monday Morning Power Hour. Regardless of whatever you love on this channel, smash that ring notification. That way you don't miss a single second. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Make sure that you follow Dave at Mach10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. Dave, an overall sloppy game to begin the day, but at the end, you found a way to figure out how this offense can look. A lot of positive moments that you can take away from Ole Miss. This feels like a team that still has the best ahead. They still control their destiny, but ultimately, there still are so many errant plays, self-inflicting wounds to where when you play against better competition, more quality opponents, really that game against Georgia in November, that might come back to bite you in the keister.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, you take a conference win as it is, even though it came in with a struggling Oklahoma team. But I give Oklahoma, Brent Venables, even Joe John Finley to an extent, the interim offensive coordinator, tight ends coach. I think they came in with a plan of kind of like, hey, this is what we're going to have to do to probably win this football game. Obviously, it didn't work. First half, though, I mean, they're up 14-10, going to the half, feeling pretty good. I thought the middle eight there with Oklahoma scoring at the end of the half, them getting the ball to start the second half. I think they needed, if they really were going to win this football game, they needed to go put up a score to start that second half. Ole Miss dominated the third quarter is what I take it really from, is the 13-0. Ole Miss outscoring Oklahoma 13-0 is really what I take from that. Again, me and you were talking about it. A little bit of a slow second half. Just kind of felt like Ole Miss, just like the boa constrictor, and just constricted him ultimately. Couldn't protect Jackson Arnold. But again, Ole Miss getting a win, got a big trip next week to Fayetteville. Oklahoma just kind of continue to have to build off this.
Listen, here's the deal. I got a lot of flack from Oklahoma faithful saying, I don't know football. I don't understand the game because I believe that Seth Luttrell was one of the biggest problems for Oklahoma's offense. Yes, you have the injuries. Yes, the offensive line is what it is. And yes, you can also blame that Michael Hawkins Jr. being a young quarterback playing in SEC conference. It's a bad look. But at the end of the day, you finally saw life. You saw momentum. You saw a consistent balance at times with Jackson Arnold back underneath center. To which I say, number one, why did you not consider going back to Jackson Arnold at any point during the Auburn game, at any point during Red River? And why did it take you to be down 21-0 against South Carolina in your homecoming before you finally realized this was the quarterback for us? And number two, why did you not give Joe John Finley or Kevin Johns more of a role in this offense alongside Seth Luttrell? Because if you finally did see life. I mean, overall, the offensive line is what it is. Overall, you look at where this play calling was, it's still got some miscues. Overall, you look at the wide receivers that have been hindered by injuries. Deion Burks, a late scratch in this game. But still, you finished the day 22-31, 182 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. You also pick up another 39 yards on the ground. This is the type of performance that if you are Brent Venables, if you are Oklahoma, you kind of figure that, yes, we may be 6-6 this year. Yes, we make it to 7-5, but we realize that the quarterback is not the problem. It's everything else around it. It's the offensive play calling. It is the overall offensive line. It is the lack of weapons. We got a dude. Now moving forward, how do we build an offensive system that will cater to his strengths to get us maybe a marquee win? Because of the way that Jackson Arnold played today, Dave, specifically in that first half, that's a team that can beat Missouri. That is a team that can beat Maine. That is a team that probably if you go back and you play against South Carolina and you don't have those turnovers, it becomes a 4-quarter battle.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it from Jackson Arnold. And this was probably echoed from the position room, quarterback meeting room, from Joe John Finley up there. Hey, if there's green grass in front of you, take it, dude. Go take that anywhere from 6 to 12 yards. Again, it doesn't be an explosive run, but you're a good enough athlete where you can keep us ahead of the chains. And I feel like he was doing that a lot in the first half. It was like, all right, like, I mean, it's not this is some beautiful play design. I mean, this isn't like we're reinventing the sport here, but we're just taking what they're giving us. Again, in today's college football, if you do that consistently, it's why Tennessee fans get upset with Nico. Like, if you take what's in front of you, the field is so hard to defend now because it's so spaced out horizontally and vertically that at some point you get a lot of these one-on-one matchups in the open field, and it's just one inside jab move to the left or right. And, hey, dude, you make him miss, it ends up being 15, 20 yards. It's kind of the simple things like me and you talk about, Cole. We overcomplicate it at times, and it's just like, look, Oklahoma's offense is what it is from an injury standpoint. It can't reach its ultimate ceiling that it went into during the season or going into the season. It is what it is. But I think, like you're saying, it can continue to improve. I think Jackson Arnold right now is the farthest thing from the issue. We got to start up front, but I don't know how much better that can get this year.
It's not. That's the problem, is that you have what you have. You have to deal with the punches. But it does feel like that, again, one game in with Joe John Finley and Kevin Johns as the play callers, you saw life. You saw a different plan. You saw a more up-tempo team. Ultimately, this is just an offense that is missing that second punch. This is an offense that doesn't have the guys up front to go ahead and block an Ole Miss defensive line. Clearly, 8 sacks on the day. I mean, when you live in Sack City, that's going to be the case. But you still did see enough progress. Let's talk about Ole Miss, though. Ole Miss, that third quarter was the difference of this game. The fact that you finally saw Jackson Dart look like Darknado 2.0, like a reincarnation, like in The Dark Knight Rises, where Bruce Wayne comes out of the cave and it's like, okay, going back to Gotham City, going to go ahead and have myself a primetime event, excited about what direction we go in. That's what you got. And I think right now, that's what you hold out hope for. Good overall play calling on the opening drive. A lot of miscues in the second half. Third quarter comes around. Ultimately, fantastic, really strong, decisive throws. Great pass to Micah Davis. Overall, a really strong performance, I thought, from Jordan Watkins stepping on up in place of Trey Harris in this game. Caden Prieskorn finding his way into the end zone. This is the offense that when you look back at the start of the year, you figured was going to be highly active in conference play.
Yeah, they got the tight ends involved today. I'm looking at it now, 12 targets. They had 8 receptions combined. Prieskorn and Daquan Wright, transfer from Virginia Tech, for a touchdown. That's when Ole Miss is at their best, is when they're incorporating the offense. I guess maybe it took Caden Prieskorn's wife tweeting at Ole Miss and get their husband some more targets. I'm kidding, but it is like you got to factor them into the game at some point. It makes defending the middle of the field. You're almost taking away a third of the field if you don't get them involved. I know Daquan Wright had the big drop in the first half. Was it 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1? That was out in the flats. He had to catch over his shoulder. Should have called it. Probably more difficult than people give credit for when you're out in the open field. But again, nonetheless, big day in the first half, carried on to the second half. So you're right. There were some things to take away for Ole Miss. Hey, you got to get shored up. A lot of it's penalties, like dumb penalties. Some of it's in the heat of the moment. You pull a face mask when the quarterback's ducking, when someone's sacking him. Is what it is. But I just saw it in the game. Like Oklahoma's drive, it's like, dude, let's just don't do anything stupid. We're going to win this game. There's like 10 seconds. They get a roughing the passer against Jackson Arnold. I'm like, dude, how are you getting a roughing the passer call this late in the game? That's stuff you got to settle in, like you mentioned, Cole. If you want to go beat Georgia in 2 weeks, and if you don't clean that stuff up, this is where you could be in trouble heading into Fayetteville next week from a look-ahead standpoint. So you got to clean up the penalties, I think, if you want to go play well and win the next 2 weeks.
That's the other part that I really want to bring up, is that you can't look ahead. Yes, you got a double-digit victory at home. Yes, you still have the best ahead of you. And yes, the way that you play today is good enough to beat multiple teams in the SEC. But the constant, careless, lackadaisical penalties. I mean, I thought Chris Pupal had a phenomenal day when you take away the penalties. But still, you have to factor in the penalties. You look at the team finishing with 15 tackles for losses. You think of the way this team played with 7 sacks on the day. The way they were able to pressure Jackson Arnold into throwing into double coverage and wide receivers weren't there. The way the secondary stepped up. But how many times did we also see horse collar tackle? How many times did we see roughing the passer? How many times did we see unsportsmanlike? I mean, like, everything that was there was self-inflicted. And that might be okay against a team like Oklahoma that currently is struggling to find any identity on offense. And yet still in the first half, they had an identity, but it doesn't work when you play against an Arkansas on the road. It's not going to work when you play against Georgia, a game that if you win, lo and behold, you're right back in the conversation to be a college football playoff contender. And more importantly, you're right back in the conversation about being a college football playoff threat. But a team like Georgia will capitalize on those points because they have the weapons, they have the personnel, they have the identity that can easily find opportunities and avenues to put up points, where a team like Oklahoma probably won't. And that's kind of where I sit right now when it comes to Ole Miss, is that you like what you saw today. You feel really confident in the offensive identity. You feel really good about the direction that this team is playing right now. And when they don't beat themselves, they are still one of the better teams in the conference. However, they have to not beat themselves. And once again, they found a way to do so at times today, to where this felt a little too close for comfort when it really shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I think they needed the tight ends to get back involved offensively. Trey Harris is out, but it looks like they got Jordan Watkins back a little bit. They need somebody to step up. Caden Lee's kind of been that guy. Trey Harris hasn't been healthy all year. Get the tight ends back. It's probably good to see Jordan Watkins, 4 receptions, 59 yards, almost had a touchdown. Good to see from him. But yeah, I thought overall, the defense dominated the second half. Team played well in the second half. Just stop the dumb turnovers. Got to just keep evolving that offensive game plan around the tight ends. I think right now, if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I don't feel great about getting the next two. But again, let's just go continue to build off of it. I feel like everybody's still waiting for that the boiling water to come off the stove from an Ole Miss game. Just the lid on the pot just to explode. Right? It's like, where is Ole Miss just going to go play a really good game against a pretty good team? We're just waiting for that, and they just can't put it all together. I mean, I took them to cover this game, lost that. I took the under in this game, that covered. But I don't know. It's just, is it going to come on for them at some point, Cole? It's kind of the question. I don't know. It's got to come on these next 2 weeks. And even a trickier spot against Florida probably looks a little tougher now. So if they want to go make the playoffs, I think Ole Miss has got a lot of things to shore up. But again, you get a conference win, got to get ready for the next 2 weeks, specifically just honing in on next week.
By the way, JD Wyatt, thank you for pointing that out. We will fix that. 26-14, not 26-24. No worries about that. We get the best of us. Here's the deal. I want to focus in on Ole Miss, and then we can go back to Oklahoma. With their offensive game plan today, do you feel like that Jackson Dart, the way that he looked, the confidence that he was throwing the football, especially in that third quarter, some of the passes that were right on the money, great consistency when it got to guys like Caden Lee, Daquan White, and Micah Davis with that big 26-yard gain, finished 22 of 30. Good overall play calling. If you get back a Trey Harris, is this a team that still looks like a contender for the college football playoff? Because the way that I view this is I want to see how Georgia looks against Florida next week in Jacksonville. But if there is any opportunity to where you have this type of game plan, as long as the defense is able to pressure Carson Beck into making mistakes, if they can take away the run game, which today was kind of an actual underlying tone that really was a bit different than what we've seen in years past against an Ole Miss team, their run defense was not good. It was not great today. In fact, this is the second time this year that a team has rushed for over 100 yards against them. But if they can take Trevor Etienne out of that game and force Carson Beck to have to throw, and their secondary plays as well as it did today, I feel like that there is enough offensive star power, even with a 60% version of Trey Harris, that can still hold its own against Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, on a given day in Oxford, yeah, I think they could play well. I think the offensive line will have to play the best game they've played all year, and probably in the Lane Kiffin era to win that game. Dart's going to have to be on. Yeah, at home, definitely could they. Can Ole Miss put together that complete game? Seems like the defense is traveling every week. Again, I said this. I think they should have won the LSU game, and I didn't think they played that well. Again, but LSU won the football game, not taken away. But if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're kind of like, God, they just walked us off. That was the only lead they had all night. It's games like this. It's games like the Kentucky game. It's kind of like their conference games at home. They've kind of been a little sluggish. I mean, it felt like they didn't even really explode off against South Carolina. It's like South Carolina got themselves in too big of a hole early. And
Dave, I don't mean to cut you off, but do you feel like that we're viewing Ole Miss in a completely different light if they don't lose that Kentucky game after today?
I don't know. I probably feel the same way. I don't think they've had a complete performance, but yeah, you'd feel better. Then you'd be talking just 10-2 Ole Miss with just a loss to Georgia and LSU get into the playoffs. What would be their biggest win at that point? That's probably what you're talking about. But from the eye test watching them, no. I just still feel like they haven't put a complete game performance together. I mean, again, to your question, if Kentucky doesn't convert that 4th and 7 for 65 yards, that ultimately set up the game-winning score. Ole Miss is sitting here with 1 loss, but I still think it's been a little sloppy, and I still think we'd be questioning if they could beat Georgia.
It's been sloppy for sure, but at this point, they lose to Georgia. They're only, and depending on what they lose to Georgia by, are you keeping out an Ole Miss team that has 10 victories with this offense, with the star power that we've seen from Jackson Dart, with Trey Harris, with this way the defense is played? If, let's say, the same thing happens with Georgia, they lose by 6. So it's now 6 combined points between LSU and Georgia, and 1 game's on the road. I don't feel like that's enough to say that the resume isn't bolsterous because if they do have 10 wins.
Do you put a 10-2? Do you put a 10-2 Ole Miss in over an 11-1 Indiana?
No, of course not. But I think that's because of the way Indiana has looked in their game.
I think that's the conversation I think that'll be the conversations that'll be had is stuff like that. 10-2 Tennessee, do they get in over an 11-1 Indiana? Like, I think those are the kind.
See, I don't disagree with you, but I think instead it's not in 11-1 Indiana. I think it's more so like a 10-2 Virginia Tech or an 11-2
I think
BYU.
I think Ole Miss and Tennessee 10-2 would get over a 10-2 ACC school.
Sure, but what I'm saying is I think that's more of the argument that you're having. 11-1 in the Big Ten, I think, is getting in no matter what. That's the way that I feel.
Probably depends what's happening with Penn State and Oregon and Ohio State. If those 3 teams are above, because I feel like, I know we're an SEC show, we're going a little off topic, but I feel like the Big Ten schedules are so uneven. Like Indiana doesn't really play a ton of tough teams. They're winning.
No, but they've won by 40 plus in 6 of their 7 games or 6 of their 8 games this year.
No. I agree. That's the conversation you're going to have. I think a 10-2 Big Ten team versus a 10-2 SEC team. The SEC team's going to get in. Same with I think a 10-2 SEC team with any other Power 4 conference with the same record is going to get the nod. I think it's when it's like an 11-1. What are we kind of talking about here?
The way that the offense looked today against an Oklahoma defense that's still, it hasn't changed my opinion. You gave up 26 points to, at one point, the most explosive offense in all of college football. It is what it is. Oklahoma has a solid defense, and more importantly, they have a defense that you feel like is a little bit wasted this year because of the way the offense has looked. But I still believe that if this version of Ole Miss shows up against Georgia and they have a healthy Trey Harris at 80%, it's going to be a battle for both sides. Real quickly, before we get on out of here, for Oklahoma, they can finish anywhere between 7-5, 6-6, and 5-7. I think all 3 are still on the table. They are. The question that I have is, and you and I were talking about this earlier this week, when you look at Oklahoma, it's very clear that Jackson Arnold has enough to like. And if he continues to show this and he continues to show the progress, I don't think that you're a quarterback away from being in that contention category in the SEC. In fact, for my money, you have the quarterback down. It's the supporting cast that you have to go after. And so if I'm Brent Venables, if I'm Joe Castiglione, if I'm the entire defensive staff this offseason, when I go to the transfer portal, I'm trying to find ways to build around Jackson Arnold. I'm trying to find ways to guarantee that he has an offensive line to protect him, that he has a defense that can once again bail him out. That's what I'm looking for in the offseason, because it feels like that, again, if this is the version that we see for the rest of the year with Arnold, where there's not a lot of turnovers, he's taken the brooding of a beat down in the backfield, 7+ sacks, 15 tackles for losses in a game, but you are seeing the offensive consistency at times with lackluster wide receiver play because it's all the second teamers. This feels like enough for me to believe, yes, there is a future with number 11 as our starting quarterback.
Yeah, if Joe Castiglione's involved in their transfer portal, they're in trouble. But to your point, I agree. Like, you got to roll with Jackson Arnold. I think as we stand, we still got multiple weeks ahead. But again, everybody just automatically assumes everybody you go get from the portal is better. We'll just go in the portal. It's like, what's the quarterback market like? What's the offensive tackle market like? But in general, for this conversation, what's the quarterback transfer market going to look like? I don't know. Again, across the board in college football this year, college football hasn't been that great. I think you develop a guy, you got to get an OC in here you like. Now, the problem will be, if they think it's maybe a 1-year deal with Brent Venables, you're going to have to pay somebody big bucks just to come in here, maybe a little overpay an OC to come there for maybe a 1-year deal. But that'll be a conversation for another day. But you're right, Cole. I think they need help across the board, especially with as many veterans as they have on defense. We'll have to plug that. Offensive line play. You like some of their young cats they've signed from a receiver standpoint, but in today's game, you never have enough. So I'm with you. You need to go filter the roster out elsewhere. It's not just a quarterback thing. And also, you don't know who the hell is going to be in the quarterback market. It may not be better than what you currently have.
Honestly, I don't think it will be. I think that, once again, I'm not saying I was right, but I believe that Jackson Arnold was going to be one of the more surprising quarterbacks in the SEC this year. I still feel like the talent level is there. It's just the personnel around him, and it's going to take time. And unfortunately, time is not of the essence at this point of the year. It's November. You are what you are on offense. You are what you are with the personnel that you have. Deion Burks, Nick Anderson, Angelo Anthony. I want to believe that they can be good players, but here's the deal. I don't know when I'm going to see them next. So now I have to go with what I know. Now I have to figure out, how do I make this work for an offense built around Arnold? And today, for the first half, it was. Bauer Sharp had a good day. The run game had a good day. The consistency that you saw from Arnold stepping up in the pocket, not just delivering clean strikes, but also his decision-making was off the roofs. I took a lot away from Ole Miss that they are still a team that we believe can make it to the college football playoff. What I took away today is that it is so frustrating as an Oklahoma fan realizing that, yes, we maybe need a move from Jackson Arnold to Michael Hawkins in that game against Tennessee. But that was the better quarterback, and I wonder what we would have looked like if we just would have played him in Red River, if we just would have played him in the South Carolina game to start off. Would things be completely different? Would we maybe still have a shot of being an 8-win team this year?
Yeah, I mean, the South Carolina game couldn't have started off worse. So, yeah, I think both games, it'd have been much better off. But no, I mean, Oklahoma, just got to keep building off that offense. Ole Miss got to clean up the undisciplined stuff.
Oklahoma does, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Oklahoma's Oklahoma. Ole Miss, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Find a way to continue to have the same offensive identity moving forward. And 10 wins are still on the horizon. Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure that you're following us on all the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at MyBookie. Go to mybookie.ag and use the promo code SECU at sign up to deliver your first welcome bonus with your deposit. MyBookie.ag, promo code SECU. Make sure that you follow Dave on Twitter at Mock10Sports, me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. And check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. Ole Miss secures a double-digit victory. They are bowl eligible. And for Oklahoma, well, it does feel like that they may have the quarterback solution figured on out. For Dave Shumate, I'm Cole Thompson. We will be back later to break down Alabama versus Mizzou. Until then, peace.